Welcome to Brooklyn 45. My first guest is Mackie Holder, who holds two important positions in New York, Barbados Consul General and chair of the group of Consul Generals representing all Caribbean countries. We'll be discussing how climate change is affecting so many countries in the Caribbean, and we'll talk about artificial intelligence as well. Also in this program, I'll be chatting with Joan Bakiriddin from the NAACP about civic engagement and how you and your community can benefit. But we begin with Mr. Mackie Holder. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you for having me, Sam. It's a pleasure.
And I have purposely addressed you as Mr. Mackie Holder and not Consul General Mackie Holder because you are also the chair of that group of Consul Generals, but everybody will get to know that as we discuss that in the program. Well, welcome to Brooklyn 45. We begin with a celebration of Caribbean heritage. What is this Caribbean heritage about? I know in a recent White House proclamation, President Joe Biden said Caribbean Americans had literally built this country and that there are barriers to success. Let's talk about the role Caribbean Americans have played in building this country.
Well, let me first start by saying that the president's comment was right on target. The history of America, the development of America, is really the history of the Caribbean and the legacy of Caribbean people. The origins of the engagement are not ones we like to recall, which was slavery. But from there, Caribbean people, Africans, Black people were brought to the States and developed the States in all aspects, starting, of course, with the massive influx of labor. And from that period until now, at every juncture and in every arena, every sphere, you would see that Caribbean people have left indelible marks on the American landscape. If you take little Barbados as an example, Barbados colonized South Carolina and parts of North Carolina. And to this day, with the Gullah Geechee people, you can see the Africa-Caribbean mix, and we're still there. The architecture of Speightstown, as I'm sure you know, Sam, is there evident in Charleston. And throughout every aspect, civil rights movement, Caribbean people of Caribbean heritage were integral in that. Music, medicine, whatever, education, Caribbean people are there. And we tend to pick out the exceptional achievers among our various countries. But the real truth is that it is the base, the mass of Caribbean people who every day go to work, do their tasks, they do it well, generally speaking, lawfully, who have built societies. As you know, Caribbean people believe in equity in housing and so on, and education. And that too, both of those are all part of the legacy of Caribbean heritage in America.
And we'll be continuing to celebrate Caribbean Heritage Months and Caribbean Heritage events all throughout the year and for many years to come.
I would really like to think so, because a few years ago, I was feeling a little out of sorts at the kind of low level of engagement around Caribbean heritage and so on. whether it was Caribbean Heritage Month or some other thing. But I've seen an uptake certainly this year. I think that is somewhat politically driven because I think the elections in New York last year was a wake-up call for many electors when they recognized that Caribbean people can help make or break, an election especially in certain districts, especially in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and parts of Queens as well, where Caribbean people are concentrated. So just as I believe that Black history should not be confined to Black History Month, I believe that we all as Caribbean people should use every opportunity to highlight the legacy and the ongoing contributions of Caribbean people in these United States.
We're talking about the legacy of Caribbean people, which you celebrate during Caribbean Heritage Month. And the month celebrates the achievements of Caribbean people. You are chair of the Caribbean, although the correct title is Caricom, the Caricom Consular Corp.
Yes.
Talk to us about this group.
The Caricom Consular Corp basically is the grouping of consul generals that represent the 15 or so countries that make up Caricom. Incidentally, this is the 50th year of Caricom. And we would have celebrated, and we are celebrating the Caribbean legacy, but also the achievement of 50 years of Caribbean integration. So we meet usually once a month to discuss matters that are relevant, to have various presentations on matters that are important to the Caribbean, whether that is business development, immigration issues, fostering cultural bridges with whoever, individuals, but also representatives from the mayor's office, chambers of commerce, and those sorts of things. And towards the end of the year, we also managed to have a little fun with a Christmas party and things like that. What I would say though is that I'm especially thankful for the core over the last years when we had COVID. We met often, once a week. We kept in touch with each other. We shared the information regarding to what was happening in our various communities, including, unfortunately, the number of people who were passing. But we were able to share important details about how we could fight the virus in our various countries and in our various communities in New York and the remaining states that we all represent. So I think that was a high point. And personally, I'm thankful to my colleagues, and I'm proud to be leading at that particular point as well.
Let's talk about climate change and how climate change is affecting Barbados, is affecting Guyana, it's affecting so many Caribbean countries. And they say that the climate change could lead to the collapse of so many Caribbean economies. Let's talk about that.
Climate change is a real thing for the Caribbean. If you go back 10, 15 years, the Caribbean has been devastated by a number of hurricanes. I mean, Bahamas, Grenada, Dominica, Antigua, to some extent, Antigua, Bermuda, have been literally being wiped out by extremely strong hurricanes. The threat is there every single year. But there have also been other things. There have been changes to the sea patterns. The Caribbean now faces the influx of sargassum, seaweed, which was not a thing 5 years ago. All of this is part of the whole climate change arena, changing climates, changing oceans, changing surfs, changing tides, and so on. And if you put in the mix now, volcano eruptions and that sort of thing, and we do recognize, as we always did, but I think the value in these things, although they are not things that we wish to happen, there's a value in them. And just as with COVID should have taught us that no country, no matter how big, no matter how wealthy, can go it alone when faced with certain things. I think what has happened is that when we see these things happen in the Caribbean and they affect every other country, we're a small group of countries, and there's a huge ripple effect. So when we have the hurricane eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we know how that impacted Barbados in particular with ashfall and so on and so forth. And of course, with ashfall comes respiratory diseases and all these sorts of things. So the whole thing is unfortunately what they call a perfect storm waiting to happen. Of course, it impacts livelihoods, it impacts economies. You know what has happened to flying fish, for instance, in Barbados. Flying fish has basically disappeared. Thankfully, there was a couple of weeks earlier this year where for some reason they came back in droves. But if you're having things like sargassum in small islands that are dependent, where people are dependent on fishing for a livelihood, fishing for food, that is a massive disruption. The disruption to crops in countries like St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica, Grenada, which are crop dependent. And we are all dependent on tourism. So again, when you have a hurricane, nobody's coming to your country. And that is what Caribbean countries face. And I will say here that it is necessary, very necessary, that countries, including the United States of America, understand clearly that they are not immune. And a real fact that I suppose most people do not accept or do not know is that America has been the country that has suffered the most from climate change. If you look back over the years at the amount of hurricanes that have impacted America,
yes.
The amount of fires, the amount of flooding, and so on. It is all climate change.
Yes.
New York was a city known for smog. And you know, if there's a fire in New Jersey or Canada or somewhere, you know, it impacts and the atmospheric condition change. So for us in the Caribbean, climate change is a life-saving thing. It is not something that we are engaged in, and certainly the Prime Minister of Barbados is fully engaged in and fully invested in bringing about some changes that can help countries withstand the impact of the devastating effects of climate change. We obviously cannot stop nature, but I think it's incumbent on world countries, which means every country in the world, to understand that this is not just happening in the Caribbean. We are just the most vulnerable.
Let's talk a bit about the concerns about crime here in New York and as well in many countries in the Caribbean.
Again, a real problem. And unfortunately, the conduit for most of the weapons that find themselves in the Caribbean is America. So the initiative by President Biden is well-founded. And I'm speaking personally now. I would like to see the practical aspects of it, as I'm sure Caribbean governments would wish to see this executed. I think up to May, end of April, mid-May, there were, I think, 256 mass shootings in the United States. Most of these, unfortunately, are around schools and so on. And if that sort of thing does not give us pause, I do not know what is. But America is a massive country, and a shooting can happen in Florida, at Parkland. And we in New York, we sympathize, we empathize, and we say, there it goes again. But we get on with our lives. And the problem with this is that it becomes normalized. But America can absorb a number of shocks that small countries in the Caribbean cannot. So unfettered gun violence can destroy a country. Again, we're talking about tourism. We're talking about countries that are very finely balanced. And once that balance is disrupted,
yes,
then we are in trouble. So Caribbean countries are very invested in stopping the stem of guns in any initiative that would help prevent the flow of guns into Caribbean countries.
Yes.
I believe there was a summit at the end of I believe May, in May for sure, between Caribbean leaders to look at how they can bring efficiencies to the fight against gun violence in particular. I think they recognize, and we all recognize that, again, much like climate change, this is a matter of survival for the future.
Yes.
And I'm happy to say in Barbados that we have seen a slowing down of gun violence. I don't have figures for other Caribbean countries, but I know that every Caribbean country is very, very invested in stemming the flow of guns. And I will say this, as personally and otherwise, you can only have gun violence if you have guns. And I should leave that where that is.
Yes. We have got less than a minute left, and we didn't get to discuss the Barbados Constitution. I'm going to have to invite you back because we do want to talk about the Barbados Constitution. Can you use 1 minute? 1 minute? You're a journalist as well. Can you use 1 minute?
To do what?
Just to say that Barbados is changing the Constitution and that you are hosting a number of meetings across New York.
Yes. With the change to a republic, it is felt that we need to make certain changes to the Constitution. Much of the Constitution, the Independence Constitution, would have taken the tone and other things, of course, from the British, which we were under its rule at a certain point. But we feel not only do we need to remove certain things from the laws that have become outdated, but we also need to structure a constitution for the next 60, 70 years. As you know, a constitution is not something that you tinker with all the time.
Right.
There are lots of different things that are, critical now, including how do you deal with the internet? Should you have term limits, sexual productive and all these things? And the Constitution Review Reform Commission has been hosting various meetings and getting inputs. And that is also a very good thing.
Yes, okay. I'm sorry, but my producer is telling me, Sam, you've gone over your time. Consul General Mackie Holder, who is also chair of the group of consuls generals representing all Caribbean countries, I want to thank you for being on Brooklyn 45, and we're going to have to invite you back to talk some more about the changes to the Barbados Constitution. Again, thank you for being my guest on Brooklyn 45.
Thank you for having me.
Are you an active member of your community? And what do you do and what should you do? 2 words for this are civic engagement, and there are many benefits. My guest to discuss this is Joan Bakiriddin, who has responsibilities for civic engagement with the NAACP. VP Joan Bakiriddin, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
My obvious first question is, what is civic engagement?
Civic engagement happens when a person or people leverage their God-given talents for the greater good.
Their God-given talents. Okay, and those talents could be what?
The talents could be anything. If you are an introvert, it could be making phone calls, it could be sending letters or doing postcards and sending those out to your community. If you are an extrovert, you could walk through your community and speak to the people that you find there and ask them about their day-to-day and share with them your knowledge, your insights, and the value that you can bring to create a sustainable community.
What are the benefits of engagement with the community?
Oh, there's so many. The most important benefit, 2 words: sustainable communities. Making sure that your community members are engaged actively so that they are able to be a part of the solution, to make sure that they are not only engaged politically, but non-politically, and just making sure that the community has what they require to, again, come back to that word, to be sustainable.
And what are the benefits to the person?
To the person, seeing the fruit of their labors being realized. For example, I had a specific experience where we did something called participatory budgeting, which enables the community to spend their own money, their own tax dollars, to improve the community. So who knows better than you what your community requires? So we had a particular individual that came to us and pointed out that on their block, in their NYCHA community, there was poor lighting. So we elevated that concern to NYCHA, and what happened? It went from one light, the need for one light being identified, to the entire complex getting upgraded lighting, improved surroundings. And if you pass by Glenwood houses right now, you'll see how wonderful it looks. And that was because one member of the community said, well, you know what I think we need? And then he or she went out and communicated that. And the other members of the community came out, voted for that particular need. And now we've got improved lighting within a NYCHA complex.
That's one example. But a lot of people still feel that their concerns don't matter. How would you address that?
Well, I would encourage them to get involved, because unless you speak about it, no one will know about it. So the way for you to make sure that your concerns are addressed is to not only come out and you speak about it, but to create a block association, join your community board, go into your community meetings for said community board, and hear from others that have the same concerns that you have, because then who knows? You may create a coalition. You may create a simple committee, as they say in church, where 2 or more are gathered, right? So there's strength in numbers. You identify the need before you know it, because you have had a conversation, because you have engaged. Now you realize that you're not the only one that is thought this way. And now you can take it again, learning from others, leveraging the skills that they have, you were then able to take that need and create a solution which then benefits the entire community.
I'm told we have just 20 seconds left. If a person is moving into the community from outside, how easy is it for them to participate?
It's as simple as joining your community board or joining your tenants association, your school board. There's so many different accumulations of people and interests that you can become a part of. Or you can just walk outside your door and say hello to one of your neighbors. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Joan Bakiriddin, for telling people how easy it is to become involved in their community and to be engaged civically. We call it civic engagement. Again, thank you very much for being on Brooklyn 45.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity.
We invite you to share information about this program with your family and friends, with members of your organization, your community group and church, your colleagues at work. Brooklyn 45 is a registered 501c3 not-for-profit organization, and your donations are tax deductible. We welcome your support. On behalf of our team at Brooklyn 45, I am Sam Taitt.
Brooklyn 45 is a 501c3 not-for-profit, and we welcome your support. Check out our website, brooklyn45.com, and feel free to donate or share it with your friends and family. Have any comments or questions? Send them to our Facebook, facebook.com/Brooklyn45TV. If you have any questions or topics you think we should cover next, shoot me an email over at brooklyn45tv@gmail.com. Thank you again for watching.